Join me as I put Stoic tactics to the test and see how I can stay calm and take action when people completely ignore me. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone's silence speaks louder than words? The ache of being ignored, whether by a friend, a loved one, or a colleague, can leave you questioning your worth. It stings. The first reaction is often one of desperation. We try harder, we reach out more. But here's the catch. In this chase, we lose ourselves. The real power lies in how we respond. And that's where Stoic philosophy comes in. What if I told you there are ancient tactics, tested by time, that can not only help you survive being ignored but thrive because of it? Stoicism teaches us one fundamental truth. You have power over your mind, not external events. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, face situations much harsher than being ignored. And yet, they maintain peace, control, and strength. Why? Because they focus on what they can control. Their reactions, not the actions of others. When you're being ignored, you face a crossroads. Will you crumble under the weight of someone's disregard? Or will you rise above and take control of your own story? Now, it's time to delve into the strategies that can transform how you respond to being ignored. Each tactic is a key that unlocks a different part of your inner strength. Let's start with tactic number 1. Focus on what you can control. I remember the first time I realized how much energy I wasted trying to control things that were out of my hands. It was frustrating, exhausting even, to constantly chase after people's attention, approval, or validation. When someone ignored me, I would replay every conversation, every message, trying to pinpoint what went wrong. But the harder I tried, the more it seemed to slip through my fingers. Then, I stumbled upon a Stoic teaching that completely changed the way I viewed these situations. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, once said, "Some things are within our power, while others are not." It was like a light bulb moment for me. All this time, I was pouring my energy into things I couldn't control. Other people's reactions, their feelings, and their decisions. The truth is, we can't control whether someone responds to us or not. We can't make them value us or pay attention. But what we can control is our response to it. We can decide how we'll react, how much power we give their actions, or in this case, their silence, over our emotions. I started to practice this daily, asking myself, am I focusing on what's within my control? If the answer was no, I would shift my focus. Instead of obsessing over why someone hadn't called or responded, I would redirect my energy to things I could control. My thoughts, my actions, my behavior. The more I did this, the more empowered I felt. When you focus on what you can control, it's as if a weight lifts off your shoulders. You realize that no matter what happens outside of you, inside, you are steady. You don't have to chase after someone's attention to feel valuable. You decide your own value. It's incredibly freeing. This is the core of Stoicism, understanding that your peace of mind isn't dependent on external events. You have full control over your mind, your thoughts, your emotions. And when you master that, nothing, especially not someone ignoring you, can shake your inner peace. Now, let's talk about tactic number 2, the need for approval. I think we've all been there, seeking validation from others, whether it's in our friendships, relationships, or even at work. We want to feel seen, heard, valued. And when we don't get that approval, when someone ignores us, it feels like a punch to the gut. I used to constantly seek approval, bending over backward just to win someone's favor or attention. But the more I chased it, the emptier I felt. Then I read something from Seneca that stopped me in my tracks. He said, "It is not the man who is too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." For me, this craving wasn't about material things. It was about approval. I realized that as long as I was chasing validation from others, I was making myself poor emotionally and mentally. The Stoics teach us to find approval from within. They believe that the only person's judgment that truly matters is our own. If you're living in alignment with your values, if you're being true to yourself, then you don't need external validation. When you let go of the need for approval, you become free. Free from the constant anxiety of wondering what others think of you. Free from feeling like you're not enough. I started practicing this in small ways. The next time I sent a message and didn't get a reply, I didn't spiral into overthinking. I reminded myself, their approval doesn't define me. I define me. Slowly, I stopped relying on others to make me feel good about myself. And that's when everything changed. When you no longer need approval, you stop bending and twisting yourself to fit someone else's mold. You become grounded in who you are. And ironically, when you stop seeking validation, you often get it. But here's the difference. You no longer need it. Your sense of self-worth isn't tied to someone else's opinion. This is one of the most powerful Stoic lessons. When you let go of needing approval, you gain a sense of freedom that no one can take away from you. Let's dive into tactic number 3, one of the most profound Stoic tactics, emotional indifference. Now, don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean you don't feel emotions or that you shut them off. Far from it. Stoicism is about feeling deeply, but not letting those feelings control you. It's about finding balance, staying calm in the storm. I used to think that if someone ignored me, it was a personal attack. I would react emotionally, anger, frustration, sadness. But over time, I realized that reacting emotionally wasn't helping me. It was only making me feel worse. That's when I started practicing emotional indifference. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When someone ignores you, it's easy to get caught up in the emotional whirlwind. You start thinking, why aren't they responding? Did I do something wrong? Do they not care? These thoughts lead to a spiral of negative emotions, and before you know it, you're overwhelmed by feelings of rejection and insecurity. But what if, instead of reacting emotionally, you simply observed? What if you could feel the sting of being ignored without letting it consume you? This is emotional indifference. It's the ability to notice your emotions, acknowledge them, and then let them pass without getting swept away. I started practicing this whenever I felt ignored. I would sit with the emotion, whether it was frustration, sadness, or even anger, and I'd ask myself, is this emotion serving me? Is it helping me stay calm and grounded? Most of the time, the answer was no. So, I'd let it go. It wasn't easy at first, but over time, it became a habit. What emotional indifference does is give you space. It creates a buffer between you and your emotions, allowing you to respond with clarity instead of reacting impulsively. You become like a mountain, steady, unshaken by the winds of others' actions or inactions. When someone ignores you, practicing emotional indifference means you don't let it control your mood or your sense of self-worth. You remain grounded, composed, and in control of your own emotional state. And that's a kind of power that nothing, no silence, no rejection, can take away from you. Now, let's see tactic number 4. See ignorance as an opportunity for growth. It's easy to take being ignored as a personal insult, right? I remember the sting, the endless wondering of what went wrong, what I could have said or done differently. But then I came across a Stoic teaching that turned this feeling on its head. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." It was a revelation for me. Being ignored, instead of a wound to my ego, could actually become a tool for growth. What if every time someone didn't reply, it wasn't a reason to feel small but an invitation to grow? That's the Stoic mindset. Instead of focusing on the pain of rejection, I began asking myself, how can this silence help me evolve? Here's what I realized. When someone ignores you, they're unknowingly giving you space. Space to reflect, to develop emotional resilience, and to focus on yourself. That silence is no longer just a void. It's an open door. It's time that can be used for self-improvement. I started using these moments to meditate, to journal, and to dig deeper into who I am. I would ask myself, what am I learning from this experience? How can this challenge make me stronger? Each time I was ignored, I came back to this idea. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I wasn't just surviving being ignored. I was thriving because of it. When you shift your mindset to see ignorance as an opportunity for growth, you reclaim your power. Instead of asking, "Why are they ignoring me?" you begin to ask, "How can this moment help me grow?" The change in perspective is everything. Now, let's talk about tactic number 5, perspective. Have you ever been so caught up in your own head, in your own feelings, that everything seems to revolve around you? I know I have. It's easy to assume that when someone ignores you, it must be because of something you did. Maybe they're mad at you. Maybe they don't like you anymore. But what if their silence has nothing to do with you at all? One of the most powerful Stoic teachings I've come across is from Epictetus. He said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." I found this so profound because it highlights how much of our suffering comes from our own minds. It's not the silence itself that causes pain. It's the story we tell ourselves about what that silence means. When you shift your perspective, you open yourself up to other possibilities. Maybe they're dealing with something in their own life. Maybe they're busy. Maybe their silence has nothing to do with you. And suddenly, the burden of their silence lifts. You stop internalizing it. Stop making it about your worth or value. The moment I stopped assuming the worst, I started feeling lighter. I realized that people's actions are a reflection of them, not me. I had spent so much time worrying about what I did wrong when, in reality, their silence had more to do with their own struggles. Shifting my perspective allowed me to release the grip that other people's actions had on me. It's liberating when you realize that you don't have to carry someone else's silence as your own burden. The 6th tactic is all about self-reliance. There's a certain freedom that comes with not needing others to validate your existence. The Stoics emphasize the importance of self-sufficiency, and this has become a cornerstone of how I navigate moments of being ignored. When you rely too much on others for your happiness, your peace becomes fragile, dependent on factors outside of your control. But when you cultivate self-reliance, you become unshakable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This speaks to the power of turning inward. When you feel ignored, instead of seeking outward validation, go within. Spend time nurturing your own passions, your own goals. The more self-reliant you become, the less you need external affirmation. There was a time when I felt anxious whenever someone didn't respond to me, but I began shifting that energy into things that I loved: writing, exercising, learning. I found that the more I relied on myself for fulfillment, the less I cared about whether others were paying attention or not. This is the beauty of self-reliance. When you build a life that feels complete on your own, the silence of others becomes irrelevant. Now, here's something unexpected for tactic number 7. Silence can be your greatest ally. For a long time, I saw silence as a void, something uncomfortable, something to avoid. But Stoicism teaches us to embrace silence, both from others and within ourselves. Silence is where you find clarity. Seneca once wrote, "It is better to be silent than to speak falsely." This hit home for me. In the past, when I was ignored, my instinct was to speak more, to reach out again, to fill the silence with words. But the more I practiced Stoicism, the more I learned the power of holding back. When you respond to silence with silence, something incredible happens. You regain control. You no longer feel the need to over-explain, to chase, to seek validation. Silence becomes a tool, a way of preserving your energy and dignity. I started practicing this, and it transformed the way I responded to being ignored. Instead of feeling desperate to fill the void, I found peace in the quiet. I realized that silence, when used wisely, can be more powerful than any words. Another crucial Stoic tactic is the number 8. Focus on the long term, rather than getting caught up in the emotions of the moment. When someone ignores you, it's easy to get wrapped up in immediate feelings of rejection or frustration. But what if you took a step back and looked at the bigger picture? The Stoics believed in the importance of long-term growth and development. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense." This quote became a guiding light for me. Instead of dwelling on the short-term pain of being ignored, I began to focus on how this experience could contribute to my growth in the long run. Each moment of silence became a lesson in patience, resilience, and self-improvement. I asked myself, how can I use this moment to become a better, stronger version of myself? By shifting my focus to long-term growth, I stopped fixating on the temporary discomfort of being ignored. I started seeing it as part of a larger journey toward becoming more self-aware, more emotionally resilient, and ultimately more at peace with myself. So, we've walked through these Stoic tactics, focusing on what you can control, detaching from the need for approval, practicing emotional indifference, and more. But how do you actually apply these lessons when life happens, when the silence feels unbearable, and when every instinct tells you to act out of desperation? This is where the real work begins. It's one thing to know these tactics in theory. It's another to put them into practice in the chaos of everyday life. I'll never forget the first time I consciously applied these Stoic teachings when I was ignored by someone I deeply cared about. I had sent a message, one that felt important to me, and waited for a response. Hours turned into days, and with each passing minute, I felt that familiar sting, the self-doubt, the questions swirling in my mind. What did I do wrong? Why weren't they answering? My mind was racing, but then I remembered. Focus on what you can control. Instead of sending follow-up messages, instead of replaying every conversation we had in my head, I took a deep breath and let go. I reminded myself that their response was beyond my control. What I could control was my reaction to their silence. And so, I chose not to spiral. I chose to focus on what I could control, my peace, my actions, my mindset. In that moment, I detached from the need for approval. I no longer needed them to validate my feelings or give me a response. I realized that their silence was not a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of their own choices. And in that realization, I found freedom. Practicing emotional indifference, I sat with my feelings of frustration, acknowledged them, and then let them pass without allowing them to dictate my actions. I chose silence in return, not out of spite, but out of strength. And here's the incredible part. When I chose silence, when I chose to let go, I felt lighter. The burden of waiting, of needing, of hoping for a reply. Suddenly it wasn't so heavy anymore. I had applied the Stoic tactics in real life, and for the first time, I felt in control not of the situation, but of myself. And that was everything. Now, let's talk about the reward. And trust me, there's a reward. You know, when you're caught up in the emotional whirlwind of being ignored, it feels like you've lost all your power. You feel small, vulnerable, like you're standing outside yourself waiting for someone else to give you a sense of worth. But here's what I learned through Stoicism. Your power doesn't come from others. It comes from within you. The moment I began to apply these Stoic tactics, something shifted. I no longer felt helpless or desperate for someone's attention. I no longer needed their response to feel validated. Instead, I reclaimed my power. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was standing taller, more grounded in who I was. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And he was right. I had been letting someone else's silence dictate my happiness. But once I took control of my thoughts, once I shifted my perspective, I realized that my happiness was always in my hands. The power to feel at peace, the power to feel strong, it had been within me all along. I just needed to reclaim it. And that's the real reward. It's not about getting a response. It's not about changing the other person's behavior. It's about reclaiming your inner strength, your emotional resilience, and your peace of mind. You realize that your worth isn't tied to anyone else. It's tied to how you treat yourself, how you respond to life's challenges, and how you rise above the noise. Once you've tasted that power, that freedom from needing others' approval, you start to build something even greater, inner strength. It's not a one-time thing. This isn't about winning one battle and being done. No, building inner strength is a journey, a process. And it starts with every small decision you make. Every time you choose not to react, every time you choose calm over chaos. For me, it became a daily practice. Each time I was ignored, each time I felt that sting of silence, I returned to these Stoic principles. And every time, I felt myself getting a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient. I stopped taking things so personally. I stopped letting other people's actions dictate how I felt about myself. Epictetus once said, "He who is not angry when he is caused to be sins." But this isn't about avoiding anger altogether. It's about knowing when to let it go. It's about mastering your emotions rather than letting them master you. The more I practiced, the more I realized that my strength didn't come from getting things right all the time. It came from my ability to stay steady, to stay grounded, no matter what life threw at me. The journey back to inner strength is slow, but it's steady. And with each step, you build something unbreakable. You build a core of resilience that can't be shaken by someone else's silence, by rejection, or by disappointment. You become someone who can stand strong, even when everything around you feels uncertain. And here's where the real magic happens. Once you've walked this path, once you've built that inner strength, you're in a position to share it with others. You're no longer just someone who has been ignored and hurt. You're someone who has grown through it. You've taken that experience, transformed it, and now you hold the wisdom that others need. I started sharing my journey with friends, people who were going through similar struggles. I told them about Stoicism, about how these ancient teachings had helped me not just survive the silence, but thrive because of it. And I began to see something incredible. My story resonated with them. They, too, were struggling with feeling ignored, with needing approval, with the weight of other people's opinions. And as I shared what I had learned, I saw them begin to shift as well. There's a saying by Seneca that I hold close. As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters. It's not about how long you struggle, how long you've been ignored, or how long it takes to reclaim your power. It's about the quality of the journey. It's about what you do with the challenges you face. By sharing your story, your wisdom, your experience, you become the elixir for others. You become the guide they need to rise above their own struggles. And in that process, you realize something profound. Every moment of silence, every moment of being ignored, it was all leading you to this point. The point where you not only find your own strength, but help others find theirs as well. So, the next time you're ignored, remember that it's not the end. It's an invitation to rise above, to focus on what you can control, and to find peace within yourself. If this message resonated with you, share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of strength and resilience. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe for more insights on how to live a Stoic life full of purpose and power.